I've invested over £4 million in properties and use these 5 key rules to consistently make a profit. The rules will get more important as the video goes on, starting with the first one. Rule number 1, you must add value. Whenever you buy an investment property, the price has to go up. Because if the price doesn't go up, you essentially aren't making any money. This is the easiest way you can add value to a property. This is a 1-bedroom flat I bought in London. It had a separate kitchen, bathroom, living room, and a bedroom. I took the kitchen and I moved that into the living room to make an open plan living room, and I turned the kitchen into the second bedroom. So it went from being a 1-bedroom flat into a 2-bedroom flat. I spent £23,000 on the refurb and the price went up by £100,000. The other ways you can add value is you can buy the property at a discount. You could find a 2-bedroom property, turn into a 3-bedroom property. You could do lease extensions. You can go into the loft. You can go into the basement. You can do side extensions, rear extensions. Don't buy something like this, which is essentially a brand new property, because when it comes to a property, either you make money by developing it or someone else makes money who's already developed it and they sell you something which is brand new. Well, but there's no money for you to be made there. Rule number 2, the 50% rule. Let's say you buy an investment property and you invest £50,000. Then ideally in 6 months time, you want to be able to get 50% of that money back, which is £25,000. How you get that money back might seem a bit confusing, but this is how it works. Let's say you buy a property for £100,000. You get a mortgage of £75,000 and you put in £25,000 yourself. Let's say you then put in another £20,000 yourself, and that might be for stamp duty, legal costs, and you might do some sort of refurb to the property. Maybe you buy a 1-bed flat and you turn it into a 2-bed flat. Now, the total amount of money you have invested from yourself is £45,000. And once you've done the refurb and you've added the value to the property, now let's say it's not worth £100,000 anymore. It's gone up to £130,000 because now you've improved the condition, you've added a bedroom and all those sort of things. You then go to a new bank and you say, come and value my property. The new bank comes to the property and they say, yes, I think it's worth £130,000. We'll give you 75% of the new value, which is £97,500. But you still owe the first mortgage of £75,000, which you have to repay to the first bank. Once you repay them the money you owe them, there is a bit of money you're left with, which is £22,500. Once you've paid off all the loans, you had invested £45,000 into that property, and 6 months later when you refinance the property, you have got £22,500 back. So essentially you have got half your money back in 6 months time. Now that's important for 2 reasons. Firstly, if you can be in a situation whereby you're buying properties and then 6 months later getting half your money back, you can simply use that money to buy more investment properties and build your portfolio quicker. The second reason is a more important reason. Let's say right now you want to do property investing, but you don't have much money to begin with. If you can figure out how to buy a property and get half your money back, you can then start finding investors and you can say to an investor, you put up 100% of the money. In 6 months time, you will get half your money back and I will do all the work. They have 50% of the money, you did all the work, and you can then just go 50-50 and you own a property 50-50 without you putting up any of the money. And the investor is not losing anything either, because he can either put up 100% of the money, own 100% of the property and do all the work, or he can put up 50% of the money, own 50% of the property and do none of the work. So the investor's better off because without doing anything, they have an investment property. And you're also better off because now you have an investment property without putting up any of your own money. Rule number 3, the 5.15% rule. The amount of rent your property makes on a yearly basis has to be at least 5.15% of the property price. The reason is this. So if you buy a property worth £100,000 and you have a loan of £75,000, and let's say you get a 5% mortgage on that loan. So £75,000, 5% is £3,750. Your mortgage is 5%, which is £3,750. But when it comes to you getting a mortgage, that mortgage has to be stress tested, not at 5%, but at 5.5%. The reason for that is because of the UK regulations when it comes to mortgages. The banks want to make sure that if mortgage rates were to go up, is the property still profitable and can you still make the mortgage payments, or are you going to default and go bankrupt? 5.5% of the £75,000 is actually £4,125. When it comes to the stress testing, it's not even the 5.5% which the banks care about. They take the 5.5% and they multiply it by 125%. The reason for that is because they want to make sure that not only can you make mortgage payments when the rates go up, but you might have some maintenance issue. The property might be empty for a while where you aren't getting any rent. So they want to put a 25% buffer in place. 5.5% at 125% is now £5,156 per month. So if you buy a £100,000 property, your rent has to be more than £5,156, which is 5.15%, and therefore that is why you have to follow the 5.15% rule. Bit of a side note, this rule becomes even more important if you're using a more complex strategy like the BRR strategy, but I'll touch on that later. So rents are very important, and the other thing which is very important is your cash flow. Now this is one of the best ways of boosting your property cash flow. In 2022, more than 30% of all nights booked on Booking.com were a holiday rental. So I furnished this small studio apartment, took some professional pictures, and I listed it on Booking.com. And someone booked for the entire month for £2,342. Across an entire year, that's more than £28,000, which is similar to a graduate salary. Not only that, 45% of people who list a property on Booking.com get a booking within the first week. So it is one of the fastest ways of getting money in right from the start. Now the real secret to making money on Booking.com isn't just listing the property, it's about getting amazing reviews. Because if you can get amazing reviews, you qualify for the Genius program and you qualify for the Booking.com Preferred Partner program. What that does is that puts your property in front of millions and millions of potential guests every single day. To list your property on Booking.com, click the link in the description below. It takes only 15 minutes to get your property up and running, and it's completely free. I have made thousands of pounds on Booking.com over the years, and now you can do exactly the same. Thank you Booking.com for sponsoring this video, and now on to the next point. Rule number 4, get permissions in place. Whatever you're going to do in order to add value, you need to make sure you have the right permission in place. Someone bought this property a few years ago. They got planning permission in order to turn this from a house into a care home. The planning permission was approved, but there was a covenant on that side, which meant that even though there was planning, they could still not turn it from a house into a care home. One of the neighbors then enforced that covenant. A covenant just means a restriction on a piece of land, and the project had to stop midway. So this company ended up losing thousands of pounds because they had bought something in order to add value by turning into a care home, which they then could not do. This is one of the projects I'm doing right now where I'm turning a house into 5 flats. This piece of land in the middle, which is a driveway for the house, is shared by 2 other properties. On that driveway, there is a covenant which says that that driveway can only be used for a single property. So if I now turn this house into 5 flats and all the cars are going through that driveway, well, there's a restriction which is not allowed. So what I had to do was, rather than having that shared driveway, I had to make my own access at the front of the property and use that as my driveway. If I was in a situation where I could not make another driveway, that deal would not work. And if I had bought that without knowing that, I would be completely screwed. However you're going to add value, speak to a solicitor and ask them, what permissions do I need in order to do what I want to do? And they'll be able to tell you what you need to do. Or comment on this video and I can tell you what you need to do. But make sure you have that permission in place before you start doing those works. Rule number 5, have multiple exits. What that means is when you get into a property investment, make sure you can get out of that deal in multiple ways. So for example, one way you can get out of that deal is if you buy something, you then sell it at the end, or you buy something and you refinance and you get some of your money that way. The more exits you have, the safer it will be as an investment. So let's say you find an investor and you say to them, you put up 100% of the money and in 6 months time, you'll get half the money back, so you'll get 50% of the money back. And let's say that is the only exit you have in that deal and there's nothing else you can do. If we look at this deal we looked at earlier, that's absolutely fine because you spent £45,000. At the end, you got £25,000 back. The investor gets half their money back and everyone's happy. However, let's look at that deal again. Let's assume it's not worth £130,000 at the end of the day. It's only worth £120,000 because you didn't get the valuation you expected, the market's gone down slightly, there could be multiple reasons. If it's only worth £120,000 and you get a 75% mortgage, well, that's £90,000. When you get the £90,000 mortgage, well, you still owe the first bank £75,000. Once you repay them, you're only left with £15,000. But in this case, you spent £45,000, you've got £15,000 back. Well, that's not 50%, so you can't repay the investor 50% in that case. So you need another way of getting out of that deal because your first strategy is just not going to work. So one thing you can do is this. If you look at the property, you bought it for £100,000 and then you spent £20,000 in terms of all the works and the fees and everything else. So your cost is £120,000. Well, if it's worth £120,000, you can then just sell it for £120,000. And yes, in that case, you haven't made any money whatsoever. And so at least it's one way of getting out of the deal without it costing you any money. So it's always safer to have multiple ways of getting out rather than just having one way of getting out.